All right, what is going on, AP Human Geography? It's Mr. Majewski. I am here with my co-teacher, Mr. Guinness, right? And hopefully he's not going to be a nuisance while I am finishing up this lecture. So you should have your modern agriculture issues notes out from yesterday. We have a few slides to finish up. Now we started today, are you good, brother? Now we started today with watching a video on commercial versus sustainable farming. Now, keep in mind, that comes from a sustainable farming organization. And so, obviously, there's a little bit of exaggeration and hyperbole and embellishment, especially when kind of making fun of the commercial farmers there. But there's great information in there, and I hope you really paid attention to that video. It's fantastic, and it is included in haiku for you if you need to see it again. So you can see kind of the differences that exist between the two, and that really gives a good idea. Mr. Guinness, what are you thinking? You don't really care whether your food is organic or not, do you? You just want as much of it as you possibly can eat. All right, well, don't growl at me. So anyways, we have a few slides to finish up here today. So I'm going to go ahead and put the co-teacher over there on the co-teaching couch, all right, his spot on the co-teaching couch. And I'm going to hope, whoa, easy there, Turbo, don't fall off. And I'm going to hope he remains relatively quiet. Okay. So we left off yesterday in class watching a couple of the Chipotle videos, which did a nice job of explaining how corporations are using organic farming to appeal to consumers, especially MDC consumers, right? Because that's where almost all of the desire for this new style is located. So we start with this awesome dot map, right? This is a dot map that shows where organic farms are located. And as you can see, they are very, very popular. They're growing in popularity in the United States and throughout Europe. And sales are going up increasingly as well because the public demands more accountability from their farmers. So again, California, the West Coast has a lot of organic farming. So does the Northeast, and then obviously the Corn Belt and the Soybean Belt there do as well. So again, this style is increasing. It is becoming more popular. Traditional commercial farming still makes up almost all of our production. It still makes up something like 70 to 80% of all products produced. But that is starting to change, and we're seeing greater and greater amounts from organic farms instead. The last topic that we need to cover is this. Now, this is an agricultural theory. All right, you already should be familiar with von Thunen from the FRQ. We have a second agricultural theory, and it's a big one. And in a lot of ways, it's really describing stages of agriculture, and it's provided by a lady named Ester Boserup. Ester Boserup, and I know there's a lot of text on this page, argued that as LDCs experienced population growth, they got to become more intensive with their land. Shoot, that applies to MDCs too. Basically, the more population grows, the less they will leave their fields fallow. So we know ideally most farmers would prefer to leave fields fallow if it at all possible to allow that soil, those nutrients to replenish. But as there's more pressure on farmers to feed their population, obviously they're going to use their land more intensively, and they're not going to be able to allow it to lay fallow as often. And so Boserup used this model to challenge Malthusians. And remember Thomas Malthus, the guy that said population would increase faster than food. And remember those neo-Malthusians from earlier in the year who argued that it was going to happen in modern times, that Malthus had gotten the time frame wrong. Well, Boserup was their greatest critic. She's the biggest challenger to these neo-Malthusians. And this is the theory she developed to show that Malthusians were incorrect. So Boserup challenged Malthusian ideas by optimistically arguing that people adapt, they always innovate, and they figure out ways to increase food production beyond what their population needs. So anytime a population is stretched, right, to where the food supply might be a problem, farmers and others in society are going to work together to come up with new methods to produce the food that is needed. So she's an optimist. She believes this will continue into the future as well. She says, hey, there's no reason to think that we won't continue to come up with new methods, more efficient methods that we can use to grow agriculture more intensely, right? To increase the intensity as the population increases and needs more food. She also argued there's no reason to believe that these won't continue into the future as well, right, as our population increases. So I've included this on the board, and hopefully you can follow along on the board as we go through this. I also have a great image that's going to pop up here that will help you to really understand it. So maybe I'll actually just use the image because those are really good. All right, so first off, what Boserup argued is that agriculture is done in stages based on the population of a country. The smallest populations are going to use what she called stage 1 intensity. She also referred to this as forest fallow. What this means is, since there's very little pressure on farmers to meet the needs of the population here, farmers are going to let their land sit for a long period of time in order to give it all the time it needs to replenish, and sometimes as much as 20 years. Because let's face it, if you don't need the land to grow crops on, right, because there's no pressure to, let it grow, let it replenish all the way back up to where you've let it sit for so long that the entire forest canopy has grown back before you go back and use it again. Trees emerge, the bushes like that connect the trees or surround the trees. The entire canopy exists in a stage 1 intensity. That's ideal. Those are small population areas. But as that population grows, right, Ester Boserup argued, farmers in this society are going to switch to what she called stage 2, bush fallow. Now, because they have more pressure to meet the needs of the population, they're going to leave their land alone long enough for bushes to grow back instead of the full forest. That's going to be about 5 to 10 years. Now, hey, she says, your soil's not going to be as replenished as it would be in stage 1, but it'll be replenished enough where you can balance the nutrients in the soil coming back with your desire to feed this ever-growing population. Boserup continued that as the population grew more, then a society would enter stage 3, which was called the short or field fallow intensity. This is where you leave a field fallow enough for 2 to 5 years in order for the short overgrowth to grow back. So almost like grasses. You allow the grassland essentially to grow back, maybe ankle deep, maybe knee deep, right? You're going to allow the grasses to grow back so that, again, not as long as it was before, more pressure on the soil, but you're producing more now, right, on the land that you have to grow crops. She argued that as the population increased even further, farmers innovated by moving into stage 4, which is annual cropping, where crops are grown every year. There may be a brief couple of months where fields are left empty, but other than that, she said they're going to grow crops annually, and obviously that means sometimes they're going to need to grow crops that will allow, that's not as hazardous to the soil. All right? And finally, she said stage 5. That's multi-cropping. That's where you plant different crops throughout the year, or you plant crops together, so like clover alongside corn. And some of those, like clover, will help to replenish or rejuvenate the soil instead of leaving it fallow. This is going to happen in countries, LDCs, who struggle to meet the needs of their populations the most. So basically, her attitude or her argument is, throughout history, a society is going to evolve in intensity from stage 1, forest fallow, to stage 2, bush fallow, to stage 3, short or field fallow, to stage 4, annual cropping, and eventually, if necessary, they will switch over to multi-cropping as well. And our attitude is, we'll eventually come up with a stage 6 or a stage 7 if we need to, if population is pushed so badly that farmers have to come up with even more innovative ways of growing. She doesn't know what those will be, right? But she predicts, based on everything she's heard so far or seen so far, that will occur and that will continue. This trend will continue. So again, there's Ester Boserup right there on the right, by the way. So again, Malthus argued, remember, population versus food. Malthus argued the green would be food production, the red would be population, and eventually population would get larger, and that's when all of those catastrophic events would take place, like war, famine, disease, right? Infanticide, all these things. Boserup argued, look, every time throughout history, population has gotten close to food production, we figured out a way to grow more. And so, it's getting close. Boom, look at this, right? New intensity. And then, we're getting close again. All right, new intensity. And then, close again, new intensity, so on and so forth. So her attitude is, why wouldn't that continue, since it's happened throughout human history up to this point since we developed agriculture? Another really great graph that I want you to see here. Remember, we're hunting and gathering, right? Then we experience the first agricultural revolution, and that's where we develop agriculture for the first time. Now we're farming, right? Then a second agricultural revolution as we begin to switch over to commercial farming, and we begin to grow crops for export, so we need more than we can consume. And then, of course, the third agricultural, or the green revolution, occurs as well, which occurred in LDCs. Now we bring the methods we were using in MDCs here to LDCs here. That's also sometimes called the medical revolution, because death rates in LDCs go down. So again, her attitude is, if we ever get challenged again, we'll have a fourth agricultural revolution, or even a fifth. And again, she's not exactly sure on what those specifics will be, but she knows based on human history that will most likely happen. So if you're an optimist, you believe food production can keep up with population until it stabilizes, you're a Boserup supporter. If you're somebody who's really concerned and pessimistic about this, you would be a Malthusian or a Neo-Malthusian instead. And this is an awesome little graph right here that shows Boserup's theory. Again, in hunting and gathering, you look for wild plants, fruits, nuts, roots, you do some hunting. Now, you switch to agriculture, and as time goes by, you're going to grow more intensively. So 1 or 2 crops, and then you leave it 15 to 25 years before you come back. Then you switch to bush fallow, 2 or more crops. Then you're going to leave it maybe, 6 to 10 years. Right? Then short fallow, 1 or 2 crops followed by 1 or 2 years of fallowness, and then annual cropping every year, and then eventually multi-cropping, where you grow multiple crops throughout the year, maybe with a short period in between. You'll also notice as time goes by, right, the technology or the tools used begins to increase. So we start with human power, right, human tools, then we start to bring animal power into it by the time we get to short fallow. And then, of course, we're starting to see tractors and other heavy machinery and modern inputs and modern irrigation as we get to the last stage, the multi-cropping stage. This here, also an awesome reflection of what we're talking about here. I would really come down to this, all right, forest to bush to short to annual to multi-cropping. And, of course, this is done as populations intensify. You'll notice the population gets larger, so we switch our methods of growing in this country in order to meet the needs. All right, so again, you must know Boserup's theory. It's never been asked about on the AP exam, and we know how they love theories for FRQs. So we've got a lot of fertile topics, no pun intended, for possible FRQs this year. You need to know Boserup, right? You need to be able to compare it to Malthus. And obviously you need to know von Thunen as well, and his particular theory. All right, that's it. I'm signing off. It's Mr. M. I would now like for you folks to go ahead and review the questions that have been provided to you. If that means you need to watch the video, go ahead and do so quietly, please, for the remainder of the class period. Make sure you have this information nailed to the wall. Get out your review sheet, because, of course, we've got this test coming up tomorrow. All right, any questions, any problems, you better let me know. I will be there after school today if you need my assistance, even though I am not in there today during class. All right, Mr. M and my co-teacher signing out. Mr. G, do you have any other comments to add, brother man? Oh, no, you're grunting. You're growling. All right, can I get a kissy? Oh, thank you. Hopefully you didn't eat a snail. All right. I will talk with you all a little bit later. Mr. M, I am outie.